The salty breeze whispered through the narrow streets of Puerto Esperanza, a quaint coastal town nestled along the picturesque shores of Latin America. 19-year-old Lucia Mendoza stood at the edge of the boardwalk, her dark curls dancing in the wind as she gazed out at the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her heart. Lucia had always dreamed of adventure beyond the confines of her small town, but never like this. As she watched the fishing boats return to the harbor, their nets heavy with the day's catch, she couldn't shake the feeling that her own life had just been caught in an invisible net, one woven with golden threads that gleamed like chains. Just hours ago, her world had shattered like glass. The memory of her parents' tear-stained faces as they confessed their desperate act still burned in her mind. Their family-owned restaurant, La Perla del Mar, had been struggling for months. Rising costs, dwindling tourism, and a string of unfortunate setbacks had pushed them to the brink of bankruptcy. Lucia had known things were bad, but she never imagined the depths of their desperation. "We had no choice, mi amor," her father had said, his voice cracking with shame and regret. It was this or lose everything we've worked for our entire lives. Her mother, usually so strong and composed, could barely meet Lucia's eyes as she explained the details of the arrangement. A wealthy Arab businessman, Karim al-Rashid, had offered them a lifeline, 1 million rials in exchange for Lucia's presence in his household for a year. It wasn't servitude, they assured her, but a form of cultural exchange and mentorship. Lucia would act as a companion and assistant, learning about international business and high society. But Lucia wasn't naive. She knew there had to be more to it than that. Why would a millionaire from halfway across the world take such an interest in a small-town girl from Latin America? As the reality of her situation sank in, Lucia felt a mix of emotions churning inside her. Anger at her parents for making such a decision without consulting her, fear of the unknown future that awaited her, and a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal that threatened to overshadow the love she had always felt for her family. She turned away from the ocean and began walking back towards the town, her feet carrying her through familiar streets that now felt alien. The colorful facades of the buildings, once cheerful and inviting, now seemed to mock her with their vibrancy. How could the world go on as if nothing had changed when her entire life had been turned upside down? As she passed La Perla del Mar, Lucia paused, her hand resting on the weathered wood of the doorframe. Through the window, she could see her parents moving about the kitchen, preparing for the evening rush. They looked tired, the weight of their decision etched into the lines on their faces. For a moment, Lucia's anger softened, replaced by a pang of sympathy. They were trying to save their legacy, to secure a future not just for themselves but for her as well. But at what cost? Lucia continued her walk, her mind racing with questions. Who was this Karim al-Rashid? What did he really want from her? And how would she survive a year away from everything and everyone she had ever known? As she rounded the corner onto her street, Lucia nearly collided with her best friend, Elena. "Lucia, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you," Elena exclaimed, her bright smile fading as she took in Lucia's troubled expression. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lucia hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. Elena had been her confidant since childhood, but this situation felt too big, too unreal to put into words. "It's complicated," Lucia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My parents, they made a deal. To save the restaurant." Elena's eyes widened with concern. "What kind of deal? Lucia, you're scaring me." Taking a deep breath, Lucia steeled herself and began to explain. As the words tumbled out, Elena's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to outrage. "They can't do this to you," she exclaimed when Lucia finished. "It's not right. You're not some commodity to be traded." Lucia shook her head, feeling suddenly exhausted. "I don't think I have a choice, Elena. If I refuse, my parents will lose everything. And it's just for a year, right? Maybe it won't be so bad." But even as she said the words, Lucia knew she didn't believe them. The thought of leaving Puerto Esperanza, of being under the control of a stranger in a foreign land, filled her with dread. Yet beneath that fear, a tiny spark of curiosity flickered to life. What opportunities might this unexpected turn of events bring? Could she find a way to turn this situation to her advantage? As the two friends stood in the fading light, a sleek black car with tinted windows glided down the street, moving with an air of purpose that seemed out of place in their quiet town. Lucia and Elena watched it pass, a shiver running down Lucia's spine. Somehow she knew that car was connected to her fate. "When do you leave?" Elena asked softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Tomorrow morning," Lucia replied, the reality of her imminent departure hitting her anew. "A car will come to take me to the airport." Elena pulled her into a fierce hug. "Promise me you'll stay in touch. And if you need anything at all, you let me know. I'll find a way to help no matter what." Lucia nodded, clinging to her friend as if she could anchor herself to this moment, to this life that was slipping away from her. As they parted, she saw tears glistening in Elena's eyes, mirroring her own. "I should go," Lucia said, her voice barely steady. "I need to pack and say goodbye to my parents." Elena squeezed her hand. "Remember who you are, Lucia Mendoza. Don't let anyone change you." With a final wavering smile, Lucia turned and walked towards her home. The sun had fully set now, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. As she reached her front door, Lucia paused, taking in the familiar sights and sounds of her neighborhood. The laughter of children playing in the distance, the aroma of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the gentle rustling of palm leaves in the evening breeze. She committed it all to memory, knowing that tomorrow would bring a new world, filled with unknowns and challenges she could scarcely imagine. With a deep breath, Lucia stepped inside, ready to face whatever the future held. Little did she know that her journey was about to become far more complex and dangerous than she could have ever anticipated, and that the dealings of the mysterious Karim al-Rashid would test her in ways she never thought possible. As the door closed behind her, the black car that had passed earlier circled back, coming to a stop across the street. Inside, a figure watched Lucia's house intently, already setting in motion plans that would irrevocably change the young woman's life forever. The gentle hum of the private jet's engines did little to calm Lucia's nerves as she gazed out the window at the endless expanse of blue below. The coast of her beloved Latin America had long since disappeared, replaced by the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. With each passing moment, she was being carried further from everything she had ever known, towards a future shrouded in uncertainty. Lucia's mind wandered back to the tearful goodbyes of that morning. Her mother's tight embrace, her father's remorseful eyes, Elena's promises to write every day, all of it felt like a distant dream now. The sleek black car that had arrived to whisk her away seemed to symbolize the stark divide between her old life and the new one that awaited her. A polite cough drew her attention. Turning, Lucia found herself face to face with Mr. Fahim, Karim al-Rashid's personal assistant. The man had been a silent presence throughout the journey, his impeccable suit and neutral expression giving nothing away. "Miss Mendoza," he said, his accent crisp and refined, "we will be landing in Dubai in approximately 2 hours. Mr. al-Rashid has arranged for a car to take us directly to his estate. I trust you'll find everything to your liking." Lucia nodded, unsure of how to respond. The luxury surrounding her, from the plush leather seats to the crystal glasses filled with sparkling water, was so far removed from her simple life in Puerto Esperanza that it felt almost unreal. "Mr. Fahim," she began hesitantly, "can you tell me more about Mr. al-Rashid? What exactly will be expected of me?" The assistant's expression softened slightly, a flicker of sympathy passing across his features. "Mr. al-Rashid is a complex man, Miss Mendoza. He values discretion and loyalty above all else. As for your role, you will act as his cultural liaison and personal assistant for social events. Your presence will help facilitate his business dealings in Latin America and other international markets." Lucia frowned, sensing there was more left unsaid. "But why me? I don't have any experience in international business or high society." Mr. Fahim's lips tightened into a thin line. "Mr. al-Rashid has his reasons, which he will explain in due time. For now, I suggest you rest. The coming days will be intense." With that, he retreated to the front of the cabin, leaving Lucia alone with her thoughts once more. As the plane began its descent into Dubai, the glittering skyline came into view, a forest of towering skyscrapers rising from the desert sands. The sight was breathtaking, but to Lucia it felt more like the bars of an opulent cage closing around her. The drive from the airport to Karim al-Rashid's estate was a blur of wide highways and extravagant architecture. As they passed through ornate gates and wound their way up a long driveway lined with palm trees, Lucia's heart began to race. The mansion that came into view was a masterpiece of modern design, fused with traditional Arabic elements, all gleaming white stone, intricate latticework, and expansive windows that reflected the setting sun. As the car came to a stop, Mr. Fahim turned to Lucia. "Remember, Miss Mendoza, Mr. Al-Rashid values propriety. Address him as Sir unless instructed otherwise, and always be respectful of local customs." Lucia nodded, smoothing down her simple sundress and wishing she had something more appropriate to wear. As she stepped out of the car, the dry heat hit her like a wall, so different from the humid warmth of her coastal hometown. A tall figure stood waiting at the top of the marble steps leading to the main entrance. As Lucia approached, she got her first glimpse of the man who now controlled her fate. Karim al-Rashid cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with olive skin and piercing dark eyes that seemed to look right through her. His tailored suit spoke of immense wealth, but it was the air of authority that surrounded him that truly commanded attention. "Miss Mendoza," he said, his voice deep and accented, "welcome to my home. I trust your journey was comfortable?" Lucia swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Yes, sir, thank you." A ghost of a smile played at the corners of Al-Rashid's mouth. "Good. Mr. Fahim will show you to your quarters. Once you've freshened up, join me in my study. We have much to discuss." With that, he turned and strode into the house, leaving Lucia to follow Mr. Fahim through a maze of opulent hallways. Her room, when they reached it, was larger than her entire house back in Puerto Esperanza. The four-poster bed, adorned with silken sheets, looked inviting after the long journey, but Lucia knew she couldn't keep her new employer waiting. After a quick shower and change into the least casual outfit she had packed, Lucia made her way to Al-Rashid's study, guided by a silent maid. The room was a testament to power and wealth: dark wood paneling, leather-bound books lining the walls, and a massive desk that dominated the space. Karim al-Rashid stood by the window, his back to her, as he gazed out at the manicured gardens below. Without turning, he spoke. "Do you know why you're here, Miss Mendoza?" Lucia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "To assist you in your business dealings, sir. And to learn about international commerce." Al-Rashid turned, fixing her with an intense stare. "That's part of it, yes. But you're here because you represent something valuable to me. Innocence. Your presence, your untainted perspective, will be an asset in the circles I move in." He moved closer, and Lucia fought the urge to step back. "The world of high finance and international politics is a treacherous one, Miss Mendoza. Enemies hide behind smiles, and alliances shift like desert sands. Your role will be to observe, to be my eyes and ears in situations where others might let their guard down." Lucia's mind reeled. This was far more than she had anticipated. I'm not sure I understand, sir. I don't know anything about politics or finance." "And that, my dear, is precisely why you're perfect for this role," Al-Rashid said, a hint of warmth creeping into his voice. "You'll learn, of course. But your natural instincts, unclouded by years of cynicism and betrayal, will be invaluable." He turned back to the window, his posture tense. "There are those who seek to undermine everything I've built, Miss Mendoza. People who destroyed my family's legacy years ago and now threaten to do so again. Your presence will help me identify them and ultimately bring them to justice." Lucia's head spun with the implications of his words. She had stepped into a world far more complex and dangerous than she could have imagined. As she struggled to find a response, Al-Rashid continued, "I know this is overwhelming, but remember, you're here of your own free will. The agreement with your parents was simply a formality. If at any point you wish to leave, you may do so. However," he paused, his eyes locking with hers, "I hope you'll stay. The opportunities I can offer you go far beyond anything you could dream of in Puerto Esperanza." Lucia felt torn between fear and an unexpected spark of excitement. This was her chance to be part of something bigger, to make a difference in ways she never thought possible. But at what cost? "I'll do my best, sir," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. Al-Rashid nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. We'll begin your training tomorrow. For now, rest. And Miss Mendoza, he added as she turned to leave, welcome to your new life. As Lucia left the study, her mind whirled with questions and possibilities. She had entered a world of power, intrigue, and hidden agendas. Little did she know that her journey was just beginning, and that the secrets lurking within the walls of this gilded mansion would test her loyalty, her courage, and her very understanding of right and wrong. Outside, as night fell over the sprawling estate, a figure moved in the shadows of the garden, watching the light in Lucia's room with keen interest. The game was afoot, and the young woman from Puerto Esperanza had unwittingly become a key player in a dangerous contest of wills and fortunes. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky when Lucia was awakened by a soft knock at her door. Disoriented, she sat up in the luxurious bed, momentarily forgetting where she was. As reality came rushing back, she called out, "Yes?" The door opened to reveal a young woman in a crisp uniform. "Good morning, Miss Mendoza. Mr. Al-Rashid requests your presence for breakfast in 30 minutes. I'm here to assist you in getting ready." Lucia blinked, still adjusting to this new reality where even dressing herself was no longer a private affair. "Thank you, but I can manage on my own," she said, trying to keep her voice polite but firm. The maid hesitated, then nodded. "As you wish. I'll wait outside to escort you to the dining room." As the door closed, Lucia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the day ahead. She moved to the closet, which had been filled with an array of designer clothes in her size. Another reminder of how thoroughly Al-Rashid had prepared for her arrival. Choosing a modest but elegant sundress, she quickly got ready, her mind racing with questions about what this first full day in her new life would bring. 30 minutes later, Lucia followed the maid through the winding corridors of the mansion. The opulence that had seemed overwhelming the night before now felt even more surreal in the clear light of day. They arrived at a sun-drenched conservatory, where a table was set for breakfast amidst a jungle of exotic plants. Karim Al-Rashid was already seated, reading a tablet with intense focus. He looked up as Lucia entered, his expression unreadable. "Good morning, Miss Mendoza. I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you, sir," Lucia replied, taking the seat across from him. A server immediately appeared, pouring coffee and offering a selection of fruits and pastries. Al-Rashid set aside his tablet, giving Lucia his full attention. "Today we begin your education in earnest. You'll start with lessons in Arabic, etiquette, and basic finance. In the afternoons, you'll shadow me in meetings and social engagements." Lucia nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. "I'll do my best to learn quickly, sir." A ghost of a smile touched Al-Rashid's lips. "I have no doubt you will. Your first test comes this evening. We're hosting a dinner party for some influential business associates. I want you to observe the guests, note their interactions, and report your impressions to me afterward." "What exactly should I be looking for?" Lucia asked, her curiosity piqued despite her apprehension. Al-Rashid leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Trust your instincts, Miss Mendoza. Who seems genuine? Who might be hiding something? In this world, alliances shift like sand dunes in the wind. Your fresh perspective may catch what my jaded eyes miss." As they finished breakfast, Mr. Fahim appeared, ready to whisk Lucia off to her first lesson. The day passed in a whirlwind of information, Arabic phrases, the intricacies of formal table settings, the basics of stock markets and international trade. By late afternoon, Lucia's head was spinning, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. She was adapting, learning, surviving. As evening approached, Lucia found herself back in her room, being fitted for a stunning evening gown by a team of stylists. The deep blue silk hugged her curves, making her feel simultaneously powerful and exposed. As she gazed at her reflection, barely recognizing the sophisticated woman staring back at her, Lucia wondered what her parents and Elena would think if they could see her now. The dinner party was held in the mansion's grand ballroom, a space that seemed to shimmer with gold and crystal. Lucia stood near Al-Rashid as he greeted guests, her eyes darting from face to face, trying to absorb every detail. The attendees were a diverse group: Middle Eastern sheiks, European industrialists, American tech moguls, and various other power players from around the globe. As the evening progressed, Lucia circulated through the crowd, sipping champagne and engaging in small talk. She was surprised to find that many guests seemed genuinely interested in her, asking about her background and her impressions of Dubai. But beneath the polite smiles and laughter, she sensed undercurrents of tension and rivalry. One guest in particular caught her attention, a charismatic Latin American politician named Carlos Vega. He seemed to command respect from the other attendees, but there was something about his smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When he approached Lucia, she felt a chill run down her spine despite his warm greeting. "Ah, Miss Mendoza," Vega said, his accent similar to her own. "It's refreshing to see a new face in these circles. Tell me, how are you finding your time with our esteemed host?" Lucia chose her words carefully, remembering Al-Rashid's instructions. "It's been an enlightening experience, sir. Mr. Al-Rashid has been very generous." Vega's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed, Karim has always had an eye for potential. I do hope you realize what you've stepped into, my dear." Before Lucia could respond, she felt a hand on her elbow. Al-Rashid had appeared beside her, his expression cordial but his eyes hard as he looked at Vega. "I see you've met our newest associate, Carlos. Miss Mendoza has been a valuable addition to my team." The two men exchanged pleasantries, but Lucia could feel the tension crackling between them. As Vega moved away, Al-Rashid leaned in close to Lucia. "Well done," he murmured. "You handled that perfectly." As the party wound down, Lucia found herself on one of the mansion's many balconies, grateful for a moment of solitude. The Dubai skyline glittered before her, a testament to ambition and the power of wealth. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her until a voice spoke. "It's quite a view, isn't it?" Lucia turned to find a young man, perhaps a few years older than herself, leaning against the balcony railing. He had an easy smile and kind eyes that immediately put her at ease. "I'm Adam," he said, offering his hand. "Karim's nephew. You must be Lucia. Uncle has been talking about you." Lucia shook his hand, surprised by the warmth in his touch. "All good things, I hope." Adam laughed, a genuine sound that was refreshing after the calculated interactions of the evening. "Let's just say you've made quite an impression. It's not easy to surprise my uncle." They fell into easy conversation, and Lucia found herself relaxing for the first time since she'd arrived in Dubai. Adam was funny and down-to-earth, regaling her with stories of growing up in the Al-Rashid family. As they talked, Lucia almost forgot about the opulence surrounding them, the hidden agendas, and the weight of expectations on her shoulders. But the moment was shattered by Mr. Fahim's appearance. "Miss Mendoza, Mr. Al-Rashid requests your presence in his study." As Lucia followed Fahim back into the mansion, she glanced over her shoulder. Adam gave her a small wave and an encouraging smile, mouthing, "Good luck." In the study, Al-Rashid was waiting, his earlier conviviality replaced by an intense focus. "Well, Miss Mendoza, what did you observe this evening?" Lucia took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. She shared her impressions of the guests, their interactions, and the underlying tensions she had sensed. When she mentioned Carlos Vega and the strange feeling he had given her, Al-Rashid's eyes gleamed with interest. "Very good," he said when she had finished. "You have a natural talent for reading people, Lucia. With some refinement, you'll be invaluable in navigating the treacherous waters ahead." As Lucia left the study, her mind was reeling. She had passed this first test, but at what cost? The world she had entered was far more complex and dangerous than she had imagined. Alliances, betrayals, and hidden agendas lurked around every corner. Back in her room, Lucia stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights. She thought of her family, of Puerto Esperanza, of the simple life she had left behind. But as she recalled the events of the evening, the intrigue, the power plays, and yes, even the unexpected connection with Adam, she felt a thrill of excitement mixed with her apprehension. She was changing, evolving, becoming someone new. The question was, would she recognize herself when this transformation was complete? And more importantly, would she like the person she was becoming? As Lucia finally drifted off to sleep, the pieces of a much larger game were already in motion. Unbeknownst to her, her actions at the dinner party had set off a chain of events that would soon draw her deeper into a web of international intrigue, testing her loyalty, her courage, and her very understanding of right and wrong. Weeks flew by in a whirlwind of lessons, social engagements, and clandestine observations. Lucia found herself adapting to her new life with surprising ease, her natural intelligence and intuition serving her well in navigating the complex world of high finance and international politics. Yet beneath the surface of her growing confidence, a nagging sense of unease persisted. On a sweltering afternoon, Lucia sat in the mansion's vast library, poring over financial reports and news articles. Her Arabic lessons had progressed to the point where she could now read the local newspapers, giving her a new perspective on the region's politics and al-Rashid's place in them. A soft knock interrupted her studies. She looked up to see Adam leaning against the doorframe, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Fancy a break? I thought you might want to see a bit more of Dubai than just the inside of this gilded cage." Lucia hesitated, glancing at the stack of reports she still needed to review. "I don't know, Adam. Your uncle—" "My uncle," Adam interrupted with a grin, "is in meetings all afternoon. Come on, live a little. I promise to have you back before he even notices you're gone." The temptation was too great to resist. Within minutes, Lucia found herself in Adam's sleek sports car, wind whipping through her hair as they sped towards the heart of Dubai. The city was a marvel of modern architecture and ancient traditions, a place where gleaming skyscrapers rose from the desert sands like mirages made real. As they explored the bustling souks and wandered along the Dubai Creek, Lucia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Adam was easy company, his jokes and stories making her laugh in a way she hadn't since leaving Puerto Esperanza. "So," Adam said as they sat at a small cafe, sipping strong Arabic coffee, "how are you really doing, Lucia? And don't give me the polite answer you give my uncle." Lucia sighed, considering her words carefully. "It's intense, overwhelming sometimes. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, trying to decode hidden meanings in every conversation." Adam nodded sympathetically. "Welcome to the world of the Al-Rashids. It's not an easy one to navigate. Can I ask you something?" Lucia leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What really happened to your family? I've heard bits and pieces, but—" A shadow passed over Adam's face. "It's a long and ugly story. Betrayal, corruption, powerful enemies. Uncle Karim was just a teenager when it all fell apart. He spent his entire adult life rebuilding, driven by a need for— well, I'm not always sure if it's justice or revenge he's after." Lucia absorbed this information, her mind racing. "And where do I fit into all of this?" Adam's expression softened. "Honestly, I think you're a wild card, someone outside the usual circles, someone who might see things differently. Uncle Karim is brilliant, but he can be single-minded. Maybe you're here to offer a fresh perspective." As the afternoon wore on, Lucia found herself relaxing in Adam's company, sharing stories of her hometown and her dreams for the future. For a few precious hours, she could almost forget the weight of expectations and secrets that had become her daily reality. But reality had a way of reasserting itself. As they drove back to the mansion, Lucia's phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Fahim. Her presence was required in Al-Rashid's study immediately upon her return. The good mood from her afternoon out evaporated as Lucia hurried through the mansion's corridors. She found Al-Rashid standing by the window, his back to her as she entered. "I trust you enjoyed your excursion with Adam," he said without turning, his tone unreadable. Lucia's heart raced. "Yes, sir. I apologize if I—" Al-Rashid waved away her apology, finally facing her. "No need. I'm not your jailer, Lucia. But I do need you focused. Something big is on the horizon." He gestured for her to sit, then slid a folder across the desk towards her. Inside were photos and documents related to Carlos Vega, the Latin American politician she had met at the dinner party. "Vega is making a play for control of several key industries in your home region," Al-Rashid explained. "On the surface, it looks like legitimate business expansion. But my sources suggest he's working with some very unsavory characters." Lucia studied the documents, her brow furrowing. These acquisitions, they would give him control over most of the major ports along the coast, including in Puerto Esperanza. Al-Rashid nodded grimly. "Exactly. I believe Vega is setting up a network for large-scale smuggling operations, drugs, weapons, who knows what else. If he succeeds, it could destabilize the entire region." A chill ran down Lucia's spine as she thought of her hometown, of the potential consequences for her family and friends. What can we do to stop him? That's where you come in, Al-Rashid said, leaning forward. Vega is hosting a charity gala next week. I want you there as my representative. Your job is to get close to him, gain his trust, find out what he's really planning. Lucia's mind reeled. This was far beyond anything she had done so far. But how? I'm not a spy. I don't know how to... You're intelligent, observant, and charming, Al-Rashid interrupted. Use those gifts. Vega has a weakness for beautiful, seemingly naive young women. Play to that. Just be careful not to get in too deep. As Lucia left the study, her head spinning with this new assignment, she nearly collided with Adam in the hallway. The easy camaraderie of their afternoon seemed a distant memory now. Everything okay? Adam asked, concern evident in his voice. Lucia forced a smile. Fine. Just work stuff. Adam's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't press the issue. Listen, I'm heading out of town for a few days on business. But when I get back, maybe we could... He trailed off and Lucia felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with her impending mission. Yeah, she said softly. I'd like that. As Adam walked away, Lucia leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. She had come to Dubai expecting to learn about business and high society. Instead, she found herself embroiled in a dangerous game of international intrigue, with the fate of her homeland potentially hanging in the balance. That night, as Lucia lay in bed unable to sleep, her mind raced with possibilities and fears. She thought of her parents, blissfully unaware of the forces at play that could reshape their lives. She thought of Elena and the promise she had made to stay in touch, a promise that had become increasingly difficult to keep as she delved deeper into Al-Rashid's world. And she thought of Adam, whose warm smile and kind eyes offered a lifeline to normalcy in this sea of complexity. But could she trust him completely? In this world of shifting alliances and hidden agendas, was anyone truly what they seemed? As dawn broke over the Dubai skyline, Lucia made a decision. She would play the role Al-Rashid had given her, would do what was necessary to protect her home and loved ones. But she would also start seeking answers of her own. There were too many shadows, too many unanswered questions surrounding her situation. Little did Lucia know that her decision to dig deeper would set in motion a chain of events that would test her loyalties, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately force her to confront the true nature of power and justice in a world where nothing was as it seemed. As she began preparing for the day ahead, a new sense of determination settled over Lucia. She was no longer just a pawn in someone else's game. It was time to become a player in her own right. The charity gala was in full swing, the opulent ballroom of Dubai's most exclusive hotel, filled with the glitterati of international business and politics. Lucia stood at the edge of the crowd, a vision in a shimmering gold gown, her dark hair swept up in an elegant updo. She sipped champagne slowly, her eyes constantly scanning the room, searching for her target. Carlos Vega made his entrance fashionably late, commanding attention as he moved through the crowd with the easy charm of a seasoned politician. Lucia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had spent the past week preparing for this moment, studying Vega's background, practicing her cover story, and honing her skills of observation and manipulation under Al-Rashid's exacting tutelage. As Vega approached the bar, Lucia made her move. She glided across the room, timing her arrival perfectly to accidentally bump into him as he turned with his drink. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, feigning embarrassment as she steadied herself against his arm. Vega's annoyance quickly turned to interest as he took in Lucia's appearance. "No harm done, my dear. In fact, I'd say this is my lucky night, to have such a beautiful woman quite literally fall into my arms." Lucia laughed, allowing a hint of flirtation to color her voice. "You're too kind, Mr. Vega." "Carlos Vega," he replied, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips in a gallant gesture. "And you are?" "Lucia Mendoza," she said, using her real name as Al-Rashid had instructed. Sometimes the best deceptions were built on kernels of truth. "I'm here representing the Al-Rashid group." A flicker of something, surprise, wariness, passed through Vega's eyes, quickly replaced by warm interest. "Ah, you work for Karim. How unexpected. Tell me, what does a lovely young woman like yourself do for such a powerful man?" Lucia smiled enigmatically. "Oh, a little of this, a little of that. Mostly, I observe. It's amazing what you can learn just by watching and listening." Vega's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed. Well, Miss Mendoza, perhaps you'd care to share some of your observations with me over a dance." As they moved onto the dance floor, Lucia felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. She was playing a dangerous game, and one misstep could have dire consequences. But as Vega's hand settled on her waist and they began to move to the music, she found herself slipping easily into her role. Their conversation flowed smoothly, touching on business, politics, and culture. Lucia carefully steered the discussion towards Vega's recent business ventures, feigning naive curiosity about his expansion plans in Latin America. "It's so exciting to see someone taking an interest in developing our home region," she said, her eyes wide with apparent admiration. "But it must be challenging, navigating all the local regulations and interests." Vega chuckled, pulling her slightly closer as they danced. "You'd be surprised how much can be accomplished with the right connections and a bit of financial persuasion. But tell me, my dear, what's a smart girl like you really doing working for Al Rashid? Surely you have ambitions of your own?" Lucia allowed a hint of vulnerability to show in her expression. "Sometimes I wonder that myself. It's all so overwhelming. The wealth, the power, the constant maneuvering. I feel like I'm in over my head." Vega's eyes gleamed with interest. "Perhaps you just need the right mentor, someone who could show you how this world really works away from Al Rashid's particular perspective." As the dance ended, Vega kept hold of Lucia's hand. "Why don't we continue this conversation somewhere more private? I have a suite upstairs with a spectacular view of the city." Lucia's heart raced. This was the opening she had been waiting for, but it was also fraught with danger. She glanced around the room, catching sight of Mr. Fahim watching from a distance, ready to intervene if necessary. "I'd love to," she said, infusing her voice with a mix of excitement and hesitation. "But I should let Mr. Al Rashid know I'll be stepping away from the event." Vega waved his hand dismissively. "No need to bother Karim. I'm sure he trusts you to handle yourself. Unless, is there something else holding you back?" Lucia bit her lip, as if considering. "No, you're right. Lead the way, Mr. Vega." As they left the ballroom, Lucia felt as if she were balancing on a knife's edge. She was about to enter the lion's den, armed only with her wits and the vague assurance of Al Rashid's distant protection. Vega's suite was as luxurious as expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking panorama of Dubai's glittering skyline. As Lucia moved to admire the view, she heard the soft click of the door locking behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Vega said, coming to stand beside her. "A testament to what can be achieved with vision and determination." Lucia turned to face him, noting the predatory glint in his eyes. "It's magnificent. But surely a man of your talents isn't satisfied with just admiring others' achievements." Vega laughed, a rich, confident sound. "Oh, I have plans of my own, my dear. Plans that could reshape the economic landscape of our entire region. Plans that someone with your intelligence and ambition might find intriguing." As Vega began to outline his vision, a network of ports and businesses that would dominate trade across Latin America, Lucia listened intently, asking carefully crafted questions to draw out more details. With each revelation, the true scope of Vega's ambitions became clear. This was far more than just a smuggling operation. It was a bid for economic dominance that could destabilize governments and reshape international alliances. But as Vega spoke, Lucia noticed something else, a growing suspicion in his eyes, a careful measuring of her reactions. She realized with a chill that she was being tested as much as he was being interrogated. "You know," Vega said, his tone suddenly sharp, "for someone who claims to be overwhelmed by the world of high finance and politics, you ask remarkably insightful questions, Miss Mendoza. Or should I say, Agent Mendoza?" Lucia's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to laugh. "Agent? Mr. Vega, you've been watching too many spy movies. I'm just a curious girl, trying to understand this world I've found myself in." Vega moved closer, his charm replaced by menace. "Is that so? Then you won't mind if I make a few calls to verify your background? I'm sure Karim won't object to me doing a little due diligence on his staff." Lucia's mind raced. She needed to find a way out of this situation, and fast. As Vega reached for his phone, she made a split-second decision. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling with what she hoped sounded like fear and resignation. "You're right. I'm not who I said I was." "But it's not what you think." Vega paused, his eyes narrowing. "Go on." Lucia took a deep breath, preparing to spin a web of half-truths and carefully crafted lies. "I'm not working for any government or agency. I'm trying to escape from Al-Rashid. He's not what he seems, Mr. Vega. The things I've seen, the documents I've found, I'm in over my head, and I don't know who to trust." She let tears fill her eyes, playing the part of a scared young woman caught in a dangerous game. "When I heard about your plans, I thought, maybe you could help me. Maybe we could help each other." Vega studied her intently, suspicion warring with interest in his expression. "That's quite a story, Miss Mendoza. If it's true, it could be very valuable to me. But if you're lying..." The threat hung in the air between them. Lucia knew she was walking a tightrope, with potential disaster on either side. But she also knew that this moment could be the key to unraveling the entire mystery surrounding her situation. As Vega considered his next move, Lucia steeled herself for whatever was to come. She had entered this world of shadows and secrets as a naive observer. Now she was becoming a player in her own right, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The tension in Vega's suite was palpable as Lucia waited for his response. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to maintain a facade of vulnerable desperation. Vega's eyes bore into her, searching for any sign of deception. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "If what you're saying is true, Miss Mendoza, you've placed yourself in a very precarious position. What exactly do you think you can offer me that would be worth the risk of crossing Karim al-Rashid?" Lucia took a deep breath, knowing her next words could either save her or condemn her. "Information, Mr. Vega. Documents detailing al-Rashid's operations, his connections, his vulnerabilities. Things that could give you a significant advantage in your business endeavors." Vega's eyebrows raised slightly. "Intriguing. And where are these documents?" "Hidden," Lucia replied quickly. "I'm not foolish enough to carry them with me, but I can get them, if you're willing to help me disappear." A slow smile spread across Vega's face. "You're either very brave or very foolish, my dear. Perhaps both. But I admit you've piqued my interest." He moved to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. "Let's talk details." For the next hour, Lucia walked a verbal tightrope, weaving a narrative of half-truths and carefully constructed lies. She drew on everything she had learned about al-Rashid's operations, twisting the information to paint a picture of corruption and hidden agendas that she claimed to have uncovered. As she spoke, she watched Vega carefully, noting the gleam of interest in his eyes. He was buying her story, or at least enough of it to keep her alive for now. But Lucia knew she was far from safe. "This is all very fascinating, Miss Mendoza," Vega said finally, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "But you understand that I'll need some proof before I can commit to anything." Lucia nodded, having anticipated this. "Of course. I can provide you with a sample of the documents within 48 hours, just enough to verify my claims without risking everything." Vega considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. You'll stay here tonight, where I can keep an eye on you. Tomorrow, we'll make arrangements for the exchange." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Vega answered it, speaking quietly to someone outside. When he turned back to Lucia, his expression was unreadable. "It seems our conversation will have to continue tomorrow. My associate will show you to a room where you can rest comfortably." Lucia's stomach dropped as a burly man entered the suite. This wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to return to al-Rashid with the information she'd gathered, not become Vega's prisoner. As she was escorted from the room, Lucia's mind raced. She needed to find a way to contact al-Rashid or Mr. Fahim to let them know what had happened. But as the door to her new room closed behind her with a heavy click, she realized just how precarious her situation had become. The room, while luxurious, was clearly designed for containment. The windows didn't open, and a quick search revealed no phones or other means of communication. Lucia sank onto the plush bed, her mind whirling with possible escape scenarios. As the hours ticked by, Lucia's thoughts turned to Adam. Had he returned from his business trip? Would he notice her absence? And if he did, would he be able to help her, or was he just as entangled in this web of secrets and lies as everyone else? Just as despair began to creep in, Lucia noticed something odd about the painting on the wall. It seemed slightly askew. Moving closer, she realized it was concealing a small air vent, and from that vent, she could hear muffled voices. Pressing her ear to the opening, Lucia strained to make out the conversation. She recognized Vega's voice along with another man she didn't know. "Risky, keeping her here," the unknown voice was saying. "If Al-Rashid discovers—" "He won't," Vega interrupted. "And even if he suspects, he can't move against us without exposing his own operations. No, this girl could be the key to everything. If her information is genuine—" "And if it's not," the other man pressed. There was a pause before Vega responded, his voice cold. "Then she'll have outlived her usefulness. We'll deal with her and Al-Rashid permanently." Lucia backed away from the vent, her heart pounding. She had less time than she thought. She needed to find a way out, and fast. As she scanned the room again, desperately searching for anything she could use, her eyes fell on the ornate desk in the corner. An idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, potentially disastrous if it failed, but it might be her only chance. Moving quickly, Lucia began to write. Not an escape plan or a cry for help, but a series of documents that looked at first glance like the sensitive information she had promised Vega. She drew on everything she had learned about Al-Rashid's business dealings, mixing truth with plausible fiction to create a compelling narrative of corruption and hidden agendas. As she worked through the night, Lucia felt a strange mix of guilt and exhilaration. She was betraying Al-Rashid's trust, revealing secrets she had sworn to protect, but she was also fighting for her survival, using every skill and bit of knowledge she had acquired in her time with him. By dawn, Lucia had produced a small stack of papers that she hoped would be convincing enough to buy her some time and possibly her freedom. Now came the hardest part, convincing Vega of their authenticity. When the door opened and Vega entered, flanked by 2 guards, Lucia was ready. She stood tall, meeting his gaze with a mixture of fear and determination. "Mr. Vega," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I believe I have something that will interest you greatly." Vega's eyes narrowed as he took in the papers on the desk. "You've been busy, I see. Let's hope for your sake that your work is as valuable as you claim." As Vega began to read, Lucia held her breath. Everything hinged on this moment. If he believed her fabrications, she might have a chance to escape. If not— Vega's expression changed as he delved deeper into the documents, his eyes widening with interest and then narrowing with suspicion. When he finally looked up at Lucia, his gaze was calculating. "This is most illuminating, Miss Mendoza. If true, this information could change the entire landscape of our business ventures in Latin America." He paused, studying her intently. "But it also raises some very interesting questions about you. How exactly did someone in your position come to possess such sensitive information?" Lucia swallowed hard, knowing her response could mean the difference between life and death. "As I told you, Mr. Vega, I'm more than just a pretty face or a naive assistant. I've been watching, learning, piecing things together. Al-Rashid may have underestimated me, but I assure you, that would be a mistake you don't want to make." For a long moment, Vega said nothing, merely regarding Lucia with an unreadable expression. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Well played, my dear. Very well played indeed. I think it's time we had a more in-depth discussion about our potential partnership." As Vega gestured for Lucia to follow him out of the room, she felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She had bought herself some time and possibly gained Vega's respect, but she had also deepened her involvement in a dangerous game, one where the lines between ally and enemy were increasingly blurred. As they walked down the opulent hallway, Lucia couldn't help but wonder. In her efforts to uncover the truth and secure her freedom, had she inadvertently set in motion events that would change everything? And more importantly, when the dust settled, would she be able to live with the consequences of her actions? Little did she know that far away, in the Al-Rashid mansion, events were unfolding that would soon force her to confront these questions head-on. The game was changing, and Lucia was about to discover just how high the stakes truly were. Back at the Al-Rashid mansion, tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Karim al-Rashid paced his study, his usually composed demeanor cracking under the weight of concern and barely contained anger. It had been over 24 hours since Lucia's last check-in, and the reports from his operatives at the gala were troubling, to say the least. "How could we have lost her?" al-Rashid demanded, rounding on Mr. Fahim. "She was supposed to be under constant surveillance." Fahim, looking more haggard than usual, shook his head. "We underestimated Vega's paranoia, sir. He must have had countermeasures in place that we didn't anticipate. The last confirmed sighting was when they left the ballroom together." Al-Rashid's fist came down hard on his desk. "Unacceptable. I want every resource we have dedicated to finding her. Now." As Fahim hurried out to relay the orders, the door to the study opened again. Adam entered, his face etched with worry. "Uncle, what's going on? Where's Lucia?" Al-Rashid regarded his nephew warily. He had noticed the growing closeness between Adam and Lucia, and while part of him saw potential strategic value in the connection, another part worried about the complications it could bring. "We're handling the situation, Adam," he said, his tone carefully measured. "Lucia's mission has encountered some unexpected difficulties." Adam's eyes widened. "Mission? What are you talking about? I thought she was just here to learn about the business, not to get involved in whatever this is." Al-Rashid sighed, suddenly feeling every one of his years. "It's complicated, Adam. Lucia has become a valuable asset in our operations. Her unique perspective and skills—" "Skills," Adam interrupted, his voice rising. "She's a 19-year-old girl from a small town, not some trained operative. How could you put her in danger like this?" The older man's eyes flashed dangerously. "Be careful, nephew. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Lucia knew the risks when she agreed to help us." Adam shook his head in disbelief. "Did she? Did she really understand what she was getting into? Or did you manipulate her, like you do everyone else?" The words hung in the air between them, charged with years of unspoken tension. Al-Rashid's expression hardened. "You're out of line, Adam. I suggest you remember your place in this family and in this organization." For a moment it seemed Adam might argue further, but then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. Just tell me she's going to be okay. Tell me we're going to get her back safely." Al-Rashid's expression softened slightly. "We're doing everything in our power to ensure her safety. But Adam, you need to understand, the situation is delicate. If Vega suspects our involvement—" Adam nodded, his jaw clenched. "I understand. What can I do to help?" As uncle and nephew began to strategize, neither of them noticed the shadow that briefly passed by the partially open door, a figure that had overheard far more than they realized. Meanwhile, in Vega's opulent penthouse, Lucia found herself in the midst of a high-stakes negotiation that she was woefully underprepared for. Vega had spent hours grilling her on the details of the documents she had fabricated, his questions becoming increasingly specific and difficult to deflect. "These financial transactions," Vega said, pointing to a particularly complex series of numbers Lucia had concocted, "they suggest a pattern of money laundering through shell companies in the Cayman Islands." "How exactly did you uncover this?" Lucia's mind raced, drawing on every scrap of knowledge she had gleaned from her time with Al-Rashid. "It wasn't easy," she began, infusing her voice with a mix of pride and caution. "I noticed discrepancies in some of the routine reports I was tasked with organizing, small inconsistencies that most people would overlook. But when I started digging deeper, cross-referencing with other documents I had access to," she spun a tale of late nights and secret investigations, watching Vega's face carefully for any sign of disbelief. To her relief, he seemed to be buying it, his expression a mix of impressed and calculating. "You've taken quite a risk, Miss Mendoza," Vega said finally, leaning back in his chair. "If even half of what you've shown me is accurate, you've made some very powerful enemies." Lucia nodded, allowing a hint of fear to show in her eyes. "I know. That's why I need your help, Mr. Vega. I can't go back, not now, and I can't disappear on my own. Al-Rashid's reach is too extensive." Vega studied her for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. "What you're asking is not a small thing. Protection from someone like Karim al-Rashid comes at a high price. Are you prepared to pay it?" The implication was clear. If Lucia wanted Vega's help, she would have to fully commit to his cause. to become a tool in his arsenal against al-Rashid and anyone else who stood in his way. As Lucia opened her mouth to respond, a commotion outside the room caught their attention. Raised voices, the sound of a scuffle. Vega's head snapped towards the door, his hand moving instinctively to his waist, where Lucia suspected he kept a concealed weapon. The door burst open, and to Lucia's shock, Adam stumbled in, restrained by two of Vega's guards. His face was bruised, his clothes disheveled, but his eyes burned with determination as they locked onto Lucia. "Let her go, Vega!" Adam shouted, struggling against his captors. "Whatever game you're playing, it's over. We know everything." Vega's eyes narrowed dangerously as he turned back to Lucia. "Well, well, it seems we have an unexpected guest. Care to explain, Miss Mendoza?" Lucia's heart raced as she looked between Vega and Adam. In that moment, she realized that every decision she had made, every lie she had told, had led her to this critical juncture. The next words out of her mouth would determine not just her fate, but Adam's as well, and potentially the outcome of the entire power struggle she had become entangled in. Drawing on every ounce of her newfound skill in deception and manipulation, Lucia prepared to make the performance of her life. But as she met Adam's desperate gaze, a flicker of doubt passed through her mind. In her efforts to uncover the truth and secure her own position, had she lost sight of what really mattered? As the tension in the room reached a breaking point, Lucia knew that her next move would set in motion a chain of events that could not be undone. The question was, which path would she choose? And could she live with the consequences of her decision? Time seemed to stand still in Vega's penthouse as Lucia faced the most crucial decision of her young life. Adam's unexpected arrival had shattered the delicate balance she'd been maintaining, and now everything hung in the balance. She could feel Vega's piercing gaze on her, waiting for an explanation, while Adam's eyes pleaded with her silently. In that moment of crisis, Lucia found a clarity she didn't know she possessed. She realized that the game she'd been playing was far larger and more dangerous than she had imagined, and it was time to take control of her own destiny. Taking a deep breath, Lucia turned to Vega, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Vega, I believe we've all been pawns in a much larger game, but now it's time for the truth to come out." Vega's eyebrows raised slightly, a mix of curiosity and suspicion in his eyes. "Go on, Miss Mendoza. I'm all ears." Lucia began to speak, weaving together the threads of truth and deception she'd gathered over the past months. She revealed how al-Rashid had brought her to Dubai under false pretenses, how she'd been thrust into a world of high-stakes business and political maneuvering. She explained her growing suspicions about the true nature of al-Rashid's operations, and how those suspicions had led her to investigate both al-Rashid and Vega. As she spoke, Lucia could see the wheels turning in Vega's mind, reassessing everything he thought he knew about her. Adam, still restrained by the guards, listened with a mix of shock and growing understanding. "The documents I showed you," Lucia continued, "they contain elements of truth, but they're not what you think they are. They're a compilation of information I've gathered on both your operations and al-Rashid's. I believe you're both involved in a complex web of illegal activities that spans continents and threatens the stability of entire regions." Vega's face hardened, his hand moving subtly towards his concealed weapon. "That's a dangerous accusation, Miss Mendoza. One that could have severe consequences for you." Lucia stood her ground, her voice gaining strength. "It's the truth, Mr. Vega, and I have evidence, real evidence, that could bring down both your empire and al-Rashid's. Evidence that I've made sure will be released to the proper authorities if anything happens to me." The tension in the room was palpable. Vega's guards looked to their boss for direction, while Adam's eyes never left Lucia, a mix of pride and fear in his gaze. Vega leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, Miss Mendoza, perhaps both. But let's say I believe you. What exactly do you hope to gain from this revelation?" Lucia took a deep breath, knowing that her next words could determine the course of her future. "What I want, Mr. Vega, is to put an end to the corruption and exploitation that both you and al-Rashid have been perpetrating. I want to protect my hometown and countless others like it from becoming pawns in your power games." She paused, her eyes moving between Vega and Adam. "But I also understand the complexities of the world we live in. I'm offering you both a chance to make things right, to use your resources and influence for positive change. In return, I'll withhold the most damaging evidence from the authorities." Adam spoke up, his voice hoarse. "Lucia, you can't trust him." "We need to—" "Quiet," Vega snapped, his eyes never leaving Lucia. He studied her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, not the charming grin he'd used to win her over at the gala, but something more genuine and perhaps more dangerous. "Well played, Miss Mendoza. Very well played indeed. I underestimated you, it seems." "We all did." He gestured to his guards to release Adam. "I think it's time we had a more open discussion about the future." As Adam rushed to Lucia's side, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, navigating the treacherous waters between Vega and Al-Rashid, and somehow finding a way to bring about positive change without losing herself in the process. Over the next several hours, Lucia found herself in the strangest negotiation of her life. Vega, seemingly impressed by her boldness and intelligence, was willing to listen to her proposals for redirecting some of his business interests towards more legitimate and beneficial endeavors. Adam, though clearly uncomfortable with the situation, provided valuable insights into Al-Rashid's operations and potential weaknesses. As dawn broke over Dubai, casting the city in a golden glow, they had hammered out the beginnings of an agreement. Vega would gradually pull back from his more exploitative ventures in Latin America, instead investing in sustainable development projects. In return, Lucia would help him navigate the complex world of international aid and development organizations, using her unique perspective and growing network of contacts. But the biggest challenge still lay ahead, confronting Al-Rashid. As they prepared to leave Vega's penthouse, Lucia turned to Adam, her expression serious. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your uncle may never be the same." Adam took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm sure, Lucia. What you've shown me, it's opened my eyes to the truth about my family's business. It's time for things to change." As they made their way to the Al-Rashid mansion, Lucia felt a mix of dread and determination. She knew that confronting Al-Rashid would be the most difficult challenge yet. He was a man accustomed to power, to being several steps ahead of everyone else. But Lucia had learned much in her time in Dubai, and she was no longer the naive girl who had arrived months ago. The mansion loomed before them, its pristine white walls gleaming in the morning sun. As they approached the entrance, Lucia saw Mr. Fahim hurrying out to meet them, relief and confusion warring on his face. "Miss Mendoza, Mr. Adam, we've been so worried. Your uncle is in his study, I assume?" Adam interrupted, his voice firm. "Good. We need to speak with him immediately." As they made their way through the familiar corridors, Lucia steeled herself for the confrontation to come. She thought of her parents back in Puerto Esperanza, of Elena and all the people whose lives were affected by the machinations of powerful men like Al-Rashid and Vega. She thought of the lessons she'd learned, the skills she'd acquired, and the person she'd become. When they reached the study door, Adam paused, looking at Lucia with a mix of admiration and concern. "Are you ready for this?" Lucia nodded, her expression resolute. "I'm ready. It's time for the truth to come out, and for things to change." As Adam pushed open the door, revealing Al-Rashid's surprised face, Lucia knew that whatever happened next would shape not just her future, but the futures of countless others. The girl from Puerto Esperanza, who had arrived in Dubai months ago, was gone. In her place stood a young woman ready to challenge the powers that be and fight for what she believed was right. The final act of this high-stakes drama was about to begin, and Lucia was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Karim al-Rashid's study was silent as a tomb as Lucia and Adam entered, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Al-Rashid's eyes darted between the two young people, a mix of relief and suspicion evident in his gaze. "Lucia, Adam," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm glad to see you both safe. I trust you have an explanation for your extended absence." Lucia stepped forward, her chin held high. Gone was the timid girl who had arrived in Dubai months ago. In her place stood a young woman who had navigated treacherous waters and emerged stronger for it. "We do, Mr. Al-Rashid," she said, her voice steady. "But I think it's time for some explanations on your part as well." Al-Rashid's eyebrows rose slightly, but he gestured for them to continue. Over the next hour, Lucia and Adam laid out everything. The true nature of Al-Rashid's operations, Vega's competing interests, and the web of corruption and exploitation that spanned continents. As they spoke, Al-Rashid's expression remained impassive, but Lucia could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. When they finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Al-Rashid spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You've taken quite a risk, both of you. Did you think you could simply waltz in here and dictate terms to me? That you could undo years of careful planning and positioning?" Adam stepped forward, placing a hand on Lucia's shoulder. "Uncle, please. This isn't about dictating terms. It's about doing what's right. The world is changing, and we need to change with it." Al-Rashid's eyes flashed. "And what do you know of the world, nephew? Of the realities of power, and the sacrifices necessary to maintain it." "More than you think," Lucia interjected, her voice firm. "We've seen the consequences of your actions, Mr. Al-Rashid. The lives affected, the communities disrupted. But we've also seen the potential for positive change." She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what came next. "We're not here to destroy what you've built. We're offering a chance to redirect it, to use your resources and influence for good." Al-Rashid leaned back in his chair, studying them both intently. "And if I refuse? If I decide that this little rebellion needs to be dealt with?" The threat hung in the air, but Lucia stood her ground. "Then the evidence we've gathered goes public. Your empire, your reputation, all of it crumbles." For a long moment, no one spoke. The fate of empires, of entire regions, hung in the balance. Then slowly a change came over Al-Rashid's face. The hard lines of anger and suspicion softened, replaced by something that looked almost like pride. "Well played, both of you," he said softly. "It seems I underestimated you, Lucia. And you, Adam? Perhaps I was wrong about your readiness to take on real responsibility." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the Dubai skyline. "You're right, of course. The world is changing. Perhaps it's time for us to change with it." What followed was a marathon negotiation session that lasted well into the night. Plans were made to gradually shift Al-Rashid's business interests towards more ethical and sustainable ventures. Lucia's connections with Vega were leveraged to create new partnerships focused on development rather than exploitation. As dawn broke once again over Dubai, a new path forward had been charted. It wouldn't be easy. There were still countless details to work out, obstacles to overcome. But for the first time, Lucia felt like they were moving in the right direction. In the weeks and months that followed, Lucia found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. She traveled between Dubai, Latin America, and other parts of the world, helping to implement the changes they had agreed upon. It was exhausting, challenging work, but she thrived on it. Adam was by her side through much of it, their bond growing stronger as they worked together to reshape the legacy of the Al-Rashid Empire. Vega, true to his word, became an unlikely ally in their efforts to bring positive change to Latin America. 1 year to the day after Lucia had first arrived in Dubai, she stood on the balcony of the Al-Rashid mansion, looking out over the city. So much had changed, both in the world around her and within herself. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Adam's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him approaching, a warm smile on his face. "Just reflecting," Lucia said, returning his smile. "It's hard to believe how much has happened in a year." Adam nodded, joining her at the railing. "You've accomplished more than most people do in a lifetime, Lucia. You should be proud." She laughed softly. "We've accomplished it, Adam. I couldn't have done any of this without you, without your uncle, without everyone who was willing to take a chance on change." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the Dubai skyline. Then Adam turned to her, his expression serious. "So, what's next for Lucia Mendoza? The world's your oyster now." Lucia considered the question carefully. I think it's time for me to go home, at least for a while, to share what I've learned with my community, to help them build a better future." Adam nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I understand. Will you come back?" Lucia reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Of course. Dubai is part of me now, for better or worse. And besides, she added with a grin, someone needs to keep you and your uncle in line. They both laughed, the sound carried away by the warm desert breeze. As night fell over Dubai, Lucia felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was ready for it. She had found her purpose, her strength, and her place in the world. The next morning, as Lucia boarded a plane bound for Puerto Esperanza, she carried with her not just the knowledge and experience she had gained, but also the hope for a better future. She had entered the world of high finance and international intrigue as a pawn, but she was leaving as a queen, ready to make her own moves and shape her own destiny. As the plane lifted off, Lucia looked out the window at the receding Dubai skyline. She thought of her parents, of Elena, of all the people back home who had no idea how much their lives were about to change. She thought of Adam, of Al-Rashid, of Vega, and all the unlikely allies she had made along the way. But most of all, she thought of the girl she had been when she first arrived in Dubai, and the woman she had become. The journey had been difficult, filled with dangers and hard choices. But in the end, Lucia knew she wouldn't have changed a thing. As the plane banked, turning towards home, Lucia smiled. This wasn't an ending, she realized. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for all those whose lives she would touch. The winds of change were blowing, and Lucia Mendoza was ready to soar. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Lucia's journey has moved and inspired you. To continue this emotional voyage, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. You can find it by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexities of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments.